Hey everyone, welcome to this week's Draw Along. It's still horror month here on the Nerd Herd, so today I wanted to draw one of my favourite monsters, the werewolf. Whoever is bitten by a werewolf and lives becomes a werewolf himself. That's a quote from the Wolfman 1941, and yep, that's what we're doing today. We're going to be drawing a werewolf, as I probably stated in the intro. Right, so I've got my screen ready, I've got my pen ready, and I'm going to go in with my outline. So the kind of werewolf I'm going to draw today is similar to kind of like the Wolfman, Werewolf by Night. I recently watched Werewolf by Night, so that's what's inspired me to do this werewolf. And also, it's Halloween. So first of all, I'm going to start off roughing out my image. So I start off with the head. And then I go in the curvature of the spine. Like so. And there we go, we've got ourselves a stick figure. So there's our stick figure. Now I'm going to go in and add in the shapes to make the arms and legs and torso. I'm also going to change the angle of that. I'm going to have my rubber on, my eraser on kind of low opacity rather than full opacity, so I can see where I've made mistakes. This is a good trick for when you're drawing anything. If you did school art classes, they might say use a putty rubber or something like that, because you can still see the mistakes you've made before, so you know not to make those mistakes again. So we go in with those shapes. I'll shove those shapes up on the screen now for you to remember. We used them in the zombie video. And here we go. So yeah, just cylinder shapes here. And notice with my cylinder shapes, if they're coming towards the screen, they're big like that. It's coming towards you like this. Or if it's going further away, so like I've got this bottom half of the leg there, it tapers away. And I'll stick that back at the full. Get rid of that. Right. Whilst I'm doing this, I'm going to give you some little fun facts I found out about werewolves in pop culture. So the first werewolf movie was released in 1913. It was about a Navajo princess, I think, who turned herself into a werewolf. And the film was called The Werewolf. But there was a fire, so all copies of that film have been destroyed. So that leaves like the most famous one is probably the 1941 Universal released Wolfman, played by Lon Chaney Jr. And this one's the one that's kind of inspired, like the designs for people, stuff like Werewolf by Night, especially if you watch the recent Werewolf by Night. That is definitely influenced by that movie. So I'm just adding the shapes of the fingers here as well. Just let you know what I'm doing. Okay. So, let me move him a bit up. There we go. So now what I want to do is I want to add the facial features. I want to have him to have a bit of a muzzle as well. Not too much of a muzzle. I kind of want him to be a blend of like a modern werewolf and the classic kind of wolf man design. So I'm going to use a little cylinder there to make a muzzle for him. As you can see, when I draw these pictures, I usually do quite rough sketches to begin with. And then I'll go in and ink the piece. So what I'm doing now is just adding the musculature. For the calves, I've just recently watched a David Finch video, so I'm going to steal kind of his idea. David Finch, the comic artist, he draws kind of circles there, like so, for when he's making the characters' calves. So there we go, we got our basic shape of the Wolfman. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to clean this up so you can follow along with the inking process. So I'm just going to go ahead and start adding in the pencils as well. So new layer. And I'm going to start refining this drawing. So this is where I work out where my shadows are going to be as well. Easy way to do fur, just do some scribbles as well. So he's covered in fur. Also, let's put some fur around his neck like that. And when it comes to his trousers, let's just put in some ripped ripped trousers. Very much like the Hulk. I always thought the Hulk was kind of like a werewolf story. Man with a monster inside of him. Beast that he can't control. Yeah, I thought the Hulk was always kind of like a werewolf story. Another thing about drawing like werewolves or anything that's kind of furry is if you're not confident with drawing your lines, you get to draw these like feathered lines, which is I see a lot of new artists doing. They'll do feathering like that, which is okay for this because your werewolf don't need that strong confident line. You can just use these zigzags for your werewolf's fur. Alright, remember the toes as well. And you can have some claws on these feet and his toes. Right, now I'm just going to go in and figure out where I want that shadow. So I want some shadow by the eye. Some there, some there. Let's go in with my... Just going with the side of my pencil. Just rough out where I want that shadow. So my light source is coming from here. So everything's going to be... Everything on this side will be dark. In darkness. The arm will cast a shadow. So a shadow there, shadow on the crotch, the knees having a shadow, his calf, there we go, the shin, sorry. There we go. Alright, so I've roughed in my shadows there. There we go, we've got our basic sketch for our werewolf. Now I'm going to go in and start inking it. And then we'll colour it at the end. I've lowered the opacity on here, I've set up a new layer, and I am ready to start inking. So let's get started. So just a tip with inking, doesn't matter what kind of tools you're using, always remember wherever your light source is, the line underneath the light source is going to be heavier than the one that's directly in the light source. So like this line here for the ear won't be as heavy as the line at the bottom of the ear. So that's a good tip to know when you're drawing anything really. Doing bushy eyebrows. Alright, some more facts about werewolves in pop culture. So there's been some famous comic werewolves in the past. Most notably recently would be Werewolf by Night, which first appeared in issue 2 of Marvel Spotlight, created by Jerry Conway, Roy Thomas, Gene Thomas, and Michael Plug. I think his name's pronounced Plug. That's one of them. Another one would be Man Wolf, again created by Jerry Conway, and this time with artist Gil Kane. This was in the pages of the Amazing Spider-Man issue 124. And if you don't know who Man Wolf is, he is J. Jonah Jameson's son, who I believe he finds a moon rock or something that turns him into a man wolf. Sometimes, with Spider-Man, he's supposed to be quite down to earth, but then there's all these fantastical things always happening to people that he knows directly. Another famous one from Marvel Comics, which I think the Nerd Herd should do they should read, is Catwolf. This is a story from the 1980s where Captain America is turned into a werewolf. Other than that, I don't know much more about it, but seeing, I'll stick up an image on the screen now so you can see what that is. And yeah, it looks as crazy as it sounds. That's like Marvel. So on to DC. If we go on to DC didn't seem to do as many or have as many famous werewolf characters as Marvel. Marvel's always been kind of, they were a monster publisher. If you think of all their characters, the Thing, the Hulk, even Spider-Man has horror elements to him. And before they started doing superheroes, they were like monster books. So, but DC don't have as big a range of werewolf characters. But probably one of the most famous would be Bigby Wolf from Fables, also known as the Big Bad Wolf, created by Bill Willingham and Lan Medina. And there's some famous werewolves for you. There's a point. If you make a mistake while you're inking traditionally, get yourself some white paint or like something like Tipex. In America, I think they call it like whiteout. That's how you cover up your mistake if you ink. If you're inking with your pen and stuff. Obviously, digitally, very easy to fix your mistakes. Also, if you're inking traditionally, think of the tools you can use. You can use a nib pen, use a pot of Indian ink. You can use fine liners. Hell, you could even use a Sharpie as well. Brushes are good as well. I'll jump back in here and say, if you want to take, as you can see, I'm not overly fussed about the rendering. If you want to take your time rendering the fur, of course it's up to you. This is just showing you how to draw. It's not telling you you need to draw it this way. And if you do draw along, please tag me and the Nerd Herd in any pictures you post up on like Instagram or anything like that. I'm at either KWiz 1988, sorry, or for better actually for this one, tag me in at Kev's Draw Along, and tag the Nerd Herd at the Nerd Herd Book Club, also on Instagram. Just going to come back in and cut in with this eraser tool. Alright. Again, if you're doing this traditionally, go in with your whiteout pen, Tipex pen. You can cut in that way. Right, there we go. There's our werewolf all inked up. And now I'm going to go ahead and colour him in. And I'll be back with one more fun fact about werewolves in comics and pop culture. Alright. Okay, for my last fun werewolf comic pop culture fact, I'm going to talk about Marv Wolfman, the former Marvel editor-in-chief and the best Wolfman in comics. You may have heard of Marv Wolfman. He's worked on The Tomb of Dracula, Blade, Spider-Man. He did a very famous run with George Perez on the new Teen Titans, Crisis on Infinite Earths, and he worked on, I think he created Nightwing. Someone correct me if that's true. So I've got a little story for you about Marv Wolfman, which I think is quite interesting. I'm going to read it directly from the IMDb trivia where I found it. It's pretty interesting about, if you know a little bit about history, about the Comics Code Authority and how they didn't allow people to say the term werewolf, because werewolves and vampires weren't allowed. But let me read that to you, and then you can see if it's interesting. I thought it was interesting. Right, hold on. Concept of comprehensive credits for writers in mainstream comic books. This occurred in 1969 when the DC horror comic House of Secrets, issue 83, had the host character in the issue's framing story mention that he is going to tell a story written by Marv Wolfman. What he said was told to him by a wandering wolfman. The American Comic Book Censor Bureau, the Comics Code Authority, refused to approve the story because that line meant that it had a werewolf in it. which was explicitly forbidden by the code. Wolfman's editor protested and explained that he wrote the line because the writer's actual surname is Wolfman. In response, the Comics Code Authority insisted on a formal writing credit in the story to show that fact, which was done. After the incident, all the talent of DC Comics demanded that they have their own names be given equivalent credits, and thus official credits became standard practice. So there we go. It was a Wolfman who was the reason for credits in DC Comics. In DC Comics mainly. Yeah, not so much Marvel Comics because they were already credited. But yeah, that's how they got around it. So even his name wasn't really allowed in the books, which is crazy. Right, I'm going to finish colouring this off and then we'll see you at the end. And there you have it, how to draw a werewolf. If you drew along, please share it with me on Instagram at KevsDrawAlong and with the Nerd Herd at the Nerd Herd Comic Book Club. Thanks again, I'll see you next week. Oh, before I go, next week is the Herd's Choice. At the end of the month on the Nerd Herd Comic Book Club, it's always down to the herd to choose what book they're reading. So we're going to kind of keep the same tradition here on Kev's Draw Along. However, it's Halloween, so there's going to be a little twist. I'm going to put up a poll, and you can either choose trick or treat. And whatever one gets picked the most will be what I'm drawing next week for the final Horror Month video. So please get your votes in, and I look forward to seeing you next week. See you all then. Bye.